Hi, folks, and welcome to a new episode of Pick Up the Controller. And today we have LeSean with us, just based in Hong Kong. And today's episode is going to be focusing on BioWare and also the fact that there's been several issues with BioWare, and also recently in the news, EA have actually released some of their staff. They said, oh, maybe we can move them into other studios. So this is from a lot of like the Respawn work, but then there's also been issues with BioWare. So we're just going to have a quick discussion about that news, and also our love of BioWare and love of the games that they also make. So just a quick introduction for yourself, LeSean.
I have actually been playing many BioWare games. I did start the party a little bit late because that's when I got a PS4 maybe in 2016. So I started off actually playing Dragon Age Inquisition, which was my first BioWare game, which is sort of what brought my love for the company. And then I unfortunately went on the downfall of then trying Mass Effect Andromeda, and that was quite traumatizing. And then I was really excited for the. I also actually pre-ordered Anthem, and then luckily I took my pre-order away. I got refunded for that, so that was good on my part, a good foresight for me. But I've always liked the way the way BioWare has their storytelling abilities, and I even used to watch the clips from Origins and Dragon Age 2, and obviously I didn't get into the Mass Effect as much because I was more of a Dragon Age kind of guy, but I think the way BioWare is able to tell stories and sort of allow your decisions to have ripple effects, especially across games, was always something that I thought was quite cool. So that's what sort of started my interest in BioWare.
Oh, thank you for that. And who did you pick as your Inquisitor? What race and also what class?
So I was an elf mage. I thought in that instance, when I was an Inquisitor, that was probably the best race to be, to get the most options of things to do and the way you connect with the game and your interactions with people. And I guess you also experience the game from a different perspective, because obviously as an elf, the history is more to do with the oppression that they faced. So even as the Inquisitor, you still sort of see the sort of subtle remarks that you get when you sort of start the game to the point where you're beloved by the end of the game, and the sort of idea that even as an elf, you're still able to sort of rise up in the ranks of society, whereas when you start as a human, you're already a noble, so there isn't really much to prove yourself in per se, other than whether you're the Herald of Andraste or not. But and then for the other races, I feel like there is a slight disconnect in sort of feeling integrated entirely into the game. For example, when you're a Canary Inquisitor, I think it was cool that they added the option to be a Canary, but then I think you sort of are just there because of the way the Qun is so disconnected from the rest of the other races. I feel like there's not really much of a reaction towards you other than, I guess, discrimination and then beloved, but it's not the same way as if you're an elf, because at least you still connect with the history and stuff like that. I will say that in the Trespasser DLC, I guess they did add the Canary thing, so there is an element of that, but then that is also a DLC. So, yeah.
True.
What about you?
For me, funny enough, I always start off with being human and being a human warrior. That's always the start off. So whether it's like the original Dragon Age, and then Dragon Age 2, and then also an Inquisition, and also I played the Veil Guard as well. Yeah, I've played that as well. And so I always start off with like a warrior, because I know it's the one that I'll like the least. Like the least. So then I'm like, I can get the story, and then I can then play it again as either a rogue or as a mage or as a dwarf, which you can only do like a rogue or a warrior, or as a Canary, or potentially as an elf as well. And I think, to your point, the elves were the best race in Inquisition, because you had the situation where, especially if you went to Orlais, they'd have this reaction of like, how could the chosen of Andraste be an elf?
Exactly.
And then like you did see in like Ferelden, also like in Dragon Age Origins, you did see a bit of the issues with like the elves and how the elves within the alienage and Ferelden are treated, and also how the elves who are part of the Dalish are treated as well. But then you fully see, especially like if a fan like myself, I read some of the books that were linked to like Dragon Age Inquisition. So these were the books that came out before. And the fact that Orlais still had major prejudices against elves, and also the fact that they were more mistreated there than they were within Ferelden. So you do really see it, especially when you go to that scene. So spoilers here for fans. When you go to what's the castle called again?
The Winter Palace. The Winter Palace.
Yes, yeah. When you go there, and the fact that being an elf, and if you're an elf and a mage, you have the minor score, and you literally have to work your way up and develop so much in-court gossip and do so many different missions in that to get enough points to be able to then do what I always wanted to do, was kind of like get all the factions to agree to a parley.
Oh, that's the option you took. That's
yeah. Because for me, it was like they were all as bad as each other. And I was like, if you go through and you see it all, they're all technically as bad as each other. So having a parlay would probably be the best than to potentially the other options, which you probably did yourself.
That's true, but I thought, because I guess this actually goes back more into my own education. I had a degree in international relations. And I think for me, when I looked at it, I thought having them do the parlay together wasn't really going to work, mainly from the fact that since they're all opposing each other and there's obviously betrayal and backstabbing, I didn't really think it would make sense that they could potentially work together as a unit without it just crumbling into a billion pieces. So I think the option that I took was to have Empress Celine and Briala lead together. And especially I thought it would be more befitting is because I wasn't, as an elf, I think it made more sense, obviously, to support a fellow elf, regardless of how crazy they may be, but, just to support. And then Empress Celine was already going to be a figurehead anyway, so to sort of dethrone her or get her killed didn't really make much sense to me. And I felt Gaspard was the most problematic. So then I was like, if you just exit him, the other two should be able to get it right and call it a day. And I think that also helps with political favor. And to be fair, the only advantage that Gaspard had was, I think, the military supported him greatly, but that was sort of it. Whereas Empress Celine had more sway in the courts, and obviously Briala had sway with the elves, so that was quite impactful, especially being an elf and then, for example, running around the courts and collecting gossip is sort of, in essence, what elven servants basically do anyway. So it's sort of getting that backhand experience that they have. So yeah. But that was a great mission. That was a great mission.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your point, the fact that they developed that game, and especially that mission, in a way that you had so many different choices, so many different options, and it actually had an impact on the game. It would have an impact on who would be in charge of Orlais. It would impact the potential missions you have when you have that huge map, and you'd be able to then send people off to different missions across Thedas, but mostly focusing on the south. And the fact that you had these key decisions which you then couldn't go back on. And also you could kind of feel the ramifications when you then go back to Haven or go back to Skyhold and then hear people talk about it, or if you would then speak to Cassandra or Josephine or Cullen as well, you could kind of get a feel. And if you spoke to your companions and also others within your your home base, you could actually feel the implications of how big your decisions are.
Definitely. And I think Oh, sorry. I was just going to add, and also I guess one of my favorite aspects of the game is also your different companion reactions to your behavior and what they think of it. And I think especially taking different party members to, for example, the Fade or the Winter Palace and then getting their reactions afterwards, I wasn't really the biggest fan of her, so I didn't really take her anywhere. But I would watch clips about her. But Sarah, for example, if you take her to the Fade, she absolutely spirals. So I think that's quite amusing. But to add on to that point, though, who was your favorite to least favorite character in the Inquisition cast?
Funnily enough, I would say that my favorite, I think it would have to be two people. I would say that my two favorites would be Iron Bull and Varric, just because I played Dragon Age 2, and then the carry on of his character and then the further development of his character I really enjoyed. And I think like Iron Bull was like a fresh, like a breath of fresh air, and then understanding the Q and especially the mission, spoilers here as well, the actual companion mission with him was that his men were on the beach when being attacked by the Venatori, and you had to choose either to save the Qun, which he still supports, or potentially save his companions from the mercenary group he's been able to set up. And then the fact that you then pick one or the other. And I think also the fact that you always see, like, with big, bulky characters, they then aren't very smart. But one thing that they did do in the first Dragon Age Origins, they had a Kunari who was your companion called Sten. And the fact that he was big and hulking, but was very intelligent, which is something that I kind of prefer because it kind of breaks the norms. But then the person I liked the least, I think it was Vivienne, the mage, because she just always got on my nerves. Like, the sassiness for no apparent reason, and like, and especially like when you choose her not to be the head of the Andrastian faith, the sass she gives you, like, and you're like, but why should I give it to you? You're basically someone who wants the status quo to stay the same, and the status quo isn't working. So like, why am I going to give you the whole Andrastian faith?
That is very, very true. I think to go back to your, sorry, I think we will discuss Vivian. That was hilarious. But to go back to Iron Bull, I really liked Iron Bull, and plus, I forgot the guy's name, but he was played actually by the guy who played Freddy on Scooby Doo. He was the voice actor for the actor who played Freddy in the live action. So that was like, I was really excited when I saw that, because that was one of my favorite movies as a child. But Iron Bull was a great character.
I think, Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah, Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah.
But he did a great job voicing Iron Bull, and I think his, spoiler alert, but I think his story reflection of the betrayal was quite interesting, because obviously until you get the Trespasser DLC, you're not really faced with the consequences of that action. And I think the most interesting thing, from my opinion, was because on my first playthrough, I thought the most logical thing was to get the Qun on your side, because I was like, oh, the Qun is distant, so it's important to bring them. So love the Bull Chargers, but they gotta go. So sad, rip. But I realized that in essence, it didn't really have much benefit. It didn't really change much within the game, whereas you could actually feel the presence of the Bull's Chargers disappearing when you actually killed them off. Like the little tavern where they would stay, be completely empty, Bull would be miserable, and then you would just have like his Qun friend that would visit like once, and then that was sort of the end of the Qun storyline until it sort of failed. And then Iron Bull's betrayal sort of adds on to that, because in essence, you had the opportunity to prove to him whether following the status quo was the most beneficial way, or putting the people who are in your ranks first. And I guess when you do that, you then show to him that it makes sense for him to not then care about you, because you clearly show you didn't care about his people. So I think that was a great aspect of storytelling for his storyline. I would say though, my favorite, I'm good also for Varric. Varric is just an amazing storyteller, even just like listening to him. I don't know, you had the Dragon Age World State. I used to always just have this little thing on, like, I used to play it and then like change the World State decisions, because I didn't actually play Origins and Dragon Age 2. I used to watch like the walkthroughs of it, so I had an understanding of everything that was going on.
Okay.
And then I would change my world states accordingly based on that. And then Varric. Oh yeah, so Varric was always one of my favorites. So Varric, that's true. Varric and Iron Bull was one of my favorites. I guess for me, Dorian was also a pretty fun character. I sort of liked his wit. I thought he was quite funny. To be honest, I get why you don't like Vivian, but to be honest, Sarah tops that for me. I'm so sorry. Sarah's so annoying. I find, but I don't know. She has like this cult following of people that love her. And
yeah, she does.
Sarah just drove me up the wall, so I just couldn't do it. But Vivian, I think she amuses me. I didn't really bring her out either. I didn't like engage with her much, but I did see like a lot of the walkthroughs, and I think, to be honest, one of the funniest walkthroughs that I saw was like, if you have her and Sarah as a companion, and then it's just them continuously going back and forth, and then just like Vivian just like naturally just looking down at her continuously, and Sarah getting annoyed and Vivian being unbothered, and I thought that was hilarious. But I wouldn't be able to stomach actually carrying them around because, like you said, Vivian just wants the status quo. And I think, especially being a mage and then hearing about the things that happen in the circle, for Vivian to then just be like, well, obviously mages need to be locked away like dogs. They're horrible things. The creature, obviously not me because I deserve the luxury life, but those other mages can go away. It's like, the maths isn't mathing. So I think on that end, I understand that, but that does lead me to my next question though. Who did you choose to be divine?
So I had like 3 playthroughs. So the first playthrough I chose Cassandra, and the second I chose Liliana. Because I think. I was going to say, because Cassandra is in the second game, and you kind of see her from someone who sticks to the rules, who's like, we must follow the rules given out by the Inquisition, because she's a Seeker, and also the Seekers, the group that she's in. You then actually see that now that she's experienced and seen the world, to her it's no longer black and white, there's actual grey, and that she understands that actually to be a leader you also have to work with people that you might not agree with, you might not agree the stance with. So therefore going forward, the potential chantry would be more, let's say, kind of like inclusive, and more that they are going to do things that are more open and reaching to the wider group, not just the people that they were originally talking to and originally engaging with. So that's the main reason. It was her evolution of being someone who is by the book, by the rules, to being more open to things. And you really see it, like, especially from like when you arrive and they first take you captive, and then you have the conversation between her and Varric, and then you see her like open up throughout the game.
That's true. I guess you do see her evolution as a character, which is it's very valid. I don't know. I think it's the epilogue of Dragon Age Inquisition when you make her the divine. Though, when I remember listening to it, and I just didn't really think she made much change. Though, like, that's what was interesting when you said Vivian followed the status quo, because I sort of thought Cassandra, in essence, kind of did the same thing. I feel like she wasn't as extreme as Vivian, but I feel like she still wasn't going to make changes, whereas Liliana, I think, invited elves and dwarves and Kunari into the chantry, which was unheard of, which I was like, oh, this is like more groundbreaking change. And I think that's why when I did my playthrough, I think every playthrough, once I got the epilogue of the rest of them, I just picked Liliana every time, because I thought, coming from, for example, as an elf, that it would make more sense for that sort of inclusivity to occur. So I really like Liliana as divine, even though I think for her it still said that she received a lot of backlash and a lot of pushback. But I think she was still very consistent. And I think for me, I really liked Liliana's hardening or unhardening story, and the impact of whether you can sort of show her that she doesn't have to take extreme measures like, espionage and killing people to sort of get results, but that there's also alternative approaches that she can take. And I think also seeing her connection, for example, to Josephine, and Josephine sort of helping to encourage that as well, because Liliana will be like, let's just kill them, let's just get out of the way. And Josephine's like, no. Like, to be honest, Josephine's quest is so long. But at least it's funny because Liliana's just sitting there like, so we can just kill them if you want. I'm just saying. And Josephine's like, no, we need to go the proper channel and the route and find all these, productive ways to get things done. And I think you sort of see that sort of battle that can happen. And I think obviously then with Liliana's quest on whether she should murder the Chantry sister or not was also quite revealing on how you want her to become in the future and the choices that she makes, which is why I really liked Liliana as a character, especially since she was from the first game. And her sort of development as well. I think she developed very well. Her and Cullen, I think, developed really well.
Yeah. Especially like Liliana starting off as an assassin who, especially in the DLC in Dragon Age Origins, you see her story of being an assassin who was betrayed by her, I think she would call like mistress, who then left her out to to drown, basically in a dungeon, had to escape, then went to the Chantry and then devoted everything to the Chantry. And then you saw, like, throughout Dragon Age Origins, even the fact that she walks up to the Warden and says, that the Maker has told me to go with you on this quest. And you can either encourage her and be like, oh yes, come with me, or follow like the Morrigan path and be like, you're a deluded person, get lost. And I think that's another thing that I think just in BioWare games in general, they never force like companions on you. And it's never a situation where there's nothing you can do that will make them stay with you. Like, for example, whether it's like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, or even going further back into their past, which we'll talk about later, there are things that can cause your party members to then leave. Like, if you haven't got the high enough level when it came to like likability or getting to know them, they can then stab you in the back, they can leave, they can decide to challenge your leadership. Like, I remember in Origins, Sten challenges your leadership if, one, he doesn't think you've made the right decisions, and two, doesn't think that you haven't built the rapport relationship with him, or like Zavron, who's like an assassin who's sent to kill the Warden. If you then don't build a good relationship later on in his own storyline, when the Antivan Crows, which he's from that Assassin's Guild, come to then try and kill the Warden again, he will switch sides and choose to kill the character. And you have the choice of killing him, potentially saying, get lost, we don't want you anymore, or potentially saying, I've saved your life yet again after you tried to kill me twice. Now, the next time, I promise this will be the last time. And then you also have the situation that you can upset any of the characters to a degree that they will then leave your party.
Yeah, and I think
which is honest. Like, that's what you expect from companions, that they're not going to just be like, oh yes, kill this village, steal here, do all this, and we'll still be here with you.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And I think even to push that further, Dragon Age Inquisition also gave you the flexibility, not with everyone, of course, but you're still able, I think you're able to kick Sarah out, you're able to, like, Vivian will leave. Like, all the characters have the possibility to leave, even though, like, some of them will physically leave, like Sarah, for example, whereas Doreen will say, like, I'm not going to give you the pleasure to make me leave until this is over, so you don't have to like me and I'll be gone once this is over, but I will be here until it is over. So I thought that was pretty good. I don't think Velgard got the memo on that, unfortunately.
No. It did not. And funny enough, I have 2 playthroughs and I haven't finished either, because I'm like, because the issue is like, IGN was saying it. This is like this year is the golden year of like RPGs. So you've got Kingdom Come Deliverance, you've got like Avowed, which came out, you've got Oblivion, the surprise drop that came out. So then I'm like, yeah, I'm fully on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Oblivion remake. So I'm like, do I really want to go back to Dragon Age? And like,
I think in regards to decision making as well, like for RPGs, I think Baldur's Gate has like set such a high standard now that a lot of people have so much respect for it. So I feel like Dragon Age had 10 years to get it right, and I don't know. It's unfortunate that they just missed the mark so atrociously.
And based on what you were saying, we can quickly talk about, just for the audience, a bit of the history of BioWare. So BioWare first started off as like an independent game studio, and they were given by the Wizards of the Coast, the owners of the Dungeons and Dragons universe, which, funny enough, are owned by Hasbro, which I believe is a company that owns Monopoly. So if I imagine the people who own Monopoly own the right to Dungeons and Dragons and to the Dungeons and Dragons film, and also I think they own the rights to Transformers as well, because they're toys, and then they've sold the film rights to Universal. So they were given permission. So BioWare were given permission to make Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So they made Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and that's why you kind of see like elements, and I think elements of like in Baldur's Gate 3 you see in BioWare games, the companions, the what's it called again? Not band.
Banter.
The banter. Thank you. the banter between companions, the fact that you have to get their approval, the fact that you can upset them to a degree that they then leave, and that if you don't get enough of their approval, if there's a key decision that goes against their beliefs or their tenets, they will then be like, you know what, sod you, I'm off doing something else. So they made the first two, but then they were having issues with Wizards of the Coast in developing like a Baldur's Gate 3, and this would have been done like in the early 2000s. So they said, well, if they're going to be annoying and tricky about this, we're going to make our own Dungeons and Dragons, and that was Dragon Age. So their actual Dungeons and Dragons game that they wanted to make independently is what they then developed, Dragon Age Origins. And funnily enough, they also made the first game of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is hopefully getting a remake. So they made that game, and you can even see within that it's turn-based, it's heavily focused on companions. If like you don't do the companion missions, you could potentially lose companions. And also there's a huge, I won't spoil it for fans because it's a major plot twist in the game. But the fact that you see from that game, and then when you play Mass Effect and then Dragon Age, you see the companion, the storytelling, you see the elements, how they've taken it through. And funny enough, I think Mass Effect was supposed to be a Star Wars game, but Star Wars technically didn't want it, so they said, let's build our own universe. And I think that's when they turned it to be more like Star Trek than like Star Wars. And I think that was a very clever thing, because if they'd made it Star Wars, people would have been like, oh, another thing. I think one thing that Star Wars has been able to break in people's minds is that literally the Jedi are space wizards.
Yeah.
And that they've broken in people's minds that, and they also break it in a way that you don't think it's too like high fantasy, it's too grand to be believable.
Yeah, it's like it's giving more futuristic.
Yeah. And like, if you would think, like, most people, if you would ask them, would you watch like wizards, like Gandalf level wizards in space, would you watch that? And most people would say, not really, that doesn't really go together. So I think that's what they've done, which was clever. So when BioWare made Mass Effect, they kind of were like, you know what, let's take the Star Trek model and be able to develop a world which is very, very, has fans till this day. Every N7 day, people are celebrating, waiting, what's the next thing with Mass Effect? And then I think it was in 2009 or 2010, they were then bought by EA, and then became a studio within EA. And then I think they then released Mass Effect. Yeah, they then released Mass Effect 2, which was then to grand success. Yes. And I think a lot of people forget that it was an Xbox timed exclusive. So like for a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years, it was on PC and Xbox, but then later came to PS3. And then they released, I think it was 2012. Yeah, I think it was 2012 or 2013, they released Mass Effect 3. And I think what people get is like, so in a short space of 7 years, they released 3 games. But then you then think about, okay, then why is it now taking so long to come up with a game?
Well, you don't forget Andromeda. That came out.
That's true. Yeah. The thing is, what people were saying is like, if they called it a new IP and said this is something different, I think fans would have liked Andromeda more. But because it was like, no, this is Mass Effect, this is the continuation of the Mass Effect story. Yeah. And like, fans are there for Shepard, for the Reapers, for the politics, for the major decisions, for that, not for exploration and research and resource gathering. They should have either been like, this is completely separate and this is way from what Shepard is doing, or said that this is a completely new IP which is separate from the Mass Effect universe.
I agree. But don't you think it's quite interesting that both Dragon Age and Mass Effect sort of had their downfall together? It wasn't like, you know what, Dragon Age is going crazy, but at least like all the Mass Effect games are still ticking all the boxes. It was like when they both spiraled, they spiraled downwards together.
But funnily enough, with people said that Dragon Age 2 was an awful game.
That is also very true. I remember there was a lot of hate.
So what you had was like, you had the first Mass Effect, which got people interested in BioWare. Then you had Dragon Age, and people are like, oh my days, this is amazing. I'm not sure about Mass Effect, but Dragon Age Origins got Game of the Year.
Yeah, no, people still say Dragon Age Origins is like one of the best games, like one of the best RPGs ever made. And even Inquisition got Game of the Year as well.
Yeah. And then Mass Effect, I think IGN classed it, if the 2010s, was the best RPG before The Witcher 3 came out, and then blew everybody out of the water. But then so they had like a period like with Mass Effect, Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect 2, where it was like they're making really, really good games. Then they came out with Dragon Age 2, they dropped. But then when they came out with with Mass Effect 3, they went up a bit, but then people didn't like the ending. So then people were like, oh, it's an amazing game, but we don't like the ending. So they then added more content for the ending. So people were like, oh, yeah, that's a good game. They then came with Inquisition. It then went through the roof. And then they brought in Andromeda. Then it then went down again. And then they had this huge hiatus. They had one IP that they were discussing, which they scrapped and turned into Anthem. And then Anthem flopped. So then the major thing was like Dragon Age... the Veilguard is, I think for a lot of fans, is like the last game to be saying that the BioWare formula. But then the issue you have is that all those people from the early days of BioWare are no longer there. So then you now have people trying to continue franchises that they have no connection to the origin. And then also, even the fact that for Dragon Age Veilguard, they said the director said it was scrapped twice and then rewritten 3 times.
Yeah, because initially it was going to be
rewrite the whole story from scratch 3 times.
It was going to be the Dreadwolf. Yeah, it was initially just going to be the Dreadwolf, and I think that was the main problem with Veilguard. Like, despite a lot of the complaints people have, I think the fact that it solely should have been a lot more about Solus, and then like Solus almost became a background character in a game that was supposed to really not only focus on his origin but also flesh him out as a character. Because it's actually funny that neither of us said this, but Solus's storytelling is actually quite good. Like his character development, so even though he's neither of our favorite Dragon Age Inquisition characters, his actual character development, like, and his story and like his great betrayal was actually quite good. And I think Varric actually said it. If you keep the original companion roster of him, Cassandra and Solus, and I think when you're wandering around the bloody hinterlands for 20 years, he says something about the craziest betrayal is not the betrayal that like you can see, is the betrayal that you can't see. And it's sort of that idea that so like the person that's standing next to you is the person that betrays you all along, sort of thing. And it's kind of interesting that he says that early game, and then for it to be Solus that is the big betrayer in the end is quite the thing. And then obviously connecting it with his sort of reputation as the Dreadwolf and the trickster god and all that sort of thing. I thought it was quite really good storytelling. So I think they really dropped the ball by making Solus more of a background character. And then the villains they did replace him with, Gillinan and the other one, I cannot remember his name.
Elganon, I believe.
Elganon, yeah. The thing about them is that they could have been good characters, but because their storyline wasn't really fleshed out properly, they were just evil for the sake of being evil for no reason. And then it sort of just didn't really feed into anything. Whereas Solus, you can't really depict him as an evil person per se, because you have an understanding of why he did what he did. Even if you don't agree with it, it's hard to then just say you're evil by default. Whereas Gillinan and Algernon were just like, we're going to destroy the world just for the vibes. And I think it's really hard to build or sort of connect to a villain like that if you can't even sort of see their reasonings for doing it. It's sort of just, we're doing it because we can. And that was one of the main gripes that I know a lot of people had with Veilguard, because I think if they kept to the source material and really focused in on building Solus's story and really sort of leaving it more open-ended in how you see Solus and whether you do want to redeem him or whether you do want to, put a stop to him and like destroy him altogether. And I think, especially with the fact that they really dropped the ball by giving up on the world state, because I think the world state was one of the best aspects of Dragon Age, for example. And I think when I used to play, when I play Inquisition, I always thought it was cool that, for example, a decision that you'd put on the world state from Origins, fair enough, it might not be like the biggest conversation, but it's sort of like, someone will mention that in passing. For example, in I think what, in Origins, if you don't save Redcliffe, like when you go to Redcliffe in Inquisition, they sort of bring up that Redcliffe wasn't saved, for example. Or if Connor got possessed by the demon, whether you kept the demon in him or you got rid of it, you can actually still spot Connor if you go to Redcliffe and you can speak to him about it briefly. Things like that, I think, is quite cool that they've incorporated that within the game, whereas I think Velgard only allowing you to have 3 options, and then the 3 options almost have no relevance to no brand relevance to the other games. I think it's what to decide what the race of the Inquisitor are, whether they cared about Solus or whether, and then whether they disbanded the Inquisition.
I think also if they saved Hawke as well.
Oh, yeah.
When you either save the Warden or Hawke.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, even with that decision, actually, I thought it was quite interesting that based on your world state, that could either be Alistair or Logain as well. And then obviously Strap was just the default one. I thought that was also quite an interesting thing that you're able to do. But I think Dragon Age Velgard separating from that wasn't helpful. I do remember some people trying to say that because it's based in Tevinter, that's why they needed... There was the justification that they needed to separate it because obviously all the other games took place in the south, and the sort of idea of, well, who the divine is isn't really going to have much relevance when you're in Tevinter, for example. So I kind of understood it from that perspective, but I also think obviously it's been 10 years and people would probably like to see the results of their actions. And for the Inquisitors to sort of just have like a sort of 2-second little and that sort of it. And then I think a lot of people are saying characters were sort of brought in for shock factor, but didn't really serve much purpose. Whereas, like, for example, if I compare Morrigan, the way she entered Inquisition compared to the way she entered Velgard was very different. And I think it probably what was for long-time fans, seeing Morrigan in Inquisition must have been like, oh wow, like this is a sort of like plot twist thing. And her whole role was very significant, even if she wasn't a companion. Whereas I feel like they just threw her in, especially when they put her in the trailer, to sort of just be like, Morrigan's going to be in this game, so you should buy it. You should buy Velgard because she's going to be there. But
I agree with.
Sorry,
I agree with you.
Will you complete Velgard though?
I probably will, because I'm someone who loves to complete things, because then I'm like, I've got this on, like, it's the same with TV shows. Like, even if they've discontinued the TV show, or if it's a show that's taken me like 10 years to finish, I'm like, I need to know how it ends, because in my mind everything's stopped on a specific pause, so I need to know how it ends, and most of the time I don't want spoilers. But I think one of the things I could have done that I think really annoyed me, having put in so many hours, like reading the books that came with Origins, the books that came with Dragon Age 2, the books that came with Inquisitor, the comics, is that even though some of the decisions were based in the South, they had world-changing repercussions. And then you also having their world state would have been a major thing. And I think also they still could have had the Ilganon and Gillinan, but had them as not as sentient villains. Because I think what happened was that we didn't fully understand, and it hasn't fully been explained, like in the main. So they explain about them in the comics, but not every fan reads the comics. But in the main game, they don't fully explain the elven gods and how the elven gods potentially are corrupted and then become archdemons. That isn't fully explained as fact throughout the whole of like the video game lore. So I was saying, if they just done it that it was a double blight and they were dragons, they were archdemons, but not like these ever powerful corrupting things that want, to your point, just want to corrupt the world so they can remake it in their own image. They could have done it that you're pissed at Solus because Solus has caused a double blight, and he's pissed at you, and the fact that you still have Solus pushing for his own agenda, and not that he's now been locked away somewhere and then now is giving you guidance. It would have been better if, like, you had, and I think this is sometimes like find annoying with games, is that when they give you, they start off with like 3 factions and then they take out one, and then it's just you and that faction. But then if you have, which I think The Witcher did really well, is if you have multiple factions, it then brings further intrigue, it then brings further choices to be made. It also brings in like another element, so it's not just Like, for example, in Veilguard, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. It's also, there's this other faction, which you had in Dragon Age Origins with Loghain, and him trying to then take power. So you had to battle him, you had to then battle the greater evil. And funny enough, Dragon Age Origins, I believe, is kind of based off Game of Thrones.
Oh, see.
So the Grey Wardens are believed to be the Night's Watch.
Oh.
So it kind of feels like they took a bit from Lord of the Rings with orcs being Darkspawn. And no, actually, no, they didn't. They didn't. The Darkspawn are the Whites. And the Archdemon is the Night King.
It's crazy. Like, all these parallels are so crazy when you put that perspective.
So I think that's where they kind of like got the idea. And then you also have like the major civil war of Loghain trying to take power after the king had been killed. And the king technically was killed because Loghain chose not to support him to fight the Darkspawn. And I think to that point that it can't, I think one of the things is if you make a Star Wars game, the general fan understands the lore in Star Wars because they've watched the films, they've watched the TV series. But if you're having a Dragon Age game and you've built this much lore for the fans to go through, it must pay off in the game.
Yeah, and you know everyone's not reading the codex, so everyone's not going to be reading codex. So I think, but yeah, and I think to add to your point further, I think like especially for me, for example, I started the game on Inquisition, so I was millions of miles behind a lot of people in understanding what was going on. I think I got it when I was younger, and I just wanted a game where I had magic. So I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is everything I wished for. Let's play, let's play." And then I got into the lore of it and completing the game, and then obviously doing my run-throughs was what sort of spawned more of my interest for it. Slight diversion, then, because I'm curious. Slight diversion. I'm curious. Did you ever watch Absolution?
No, I haven't watched it, no.
Dragon Age Absolution, yeah. Because I thought that, because I assumed that when that Netflix series came out that they were going to connect it with the new game, but there was no connection to that, so I don't really know why they made it. But do you plan on watching it? Can I give you like a little spoiler?
No, you can give me a spoiler, yeah, definitely, yes.
One thing that I was really excited about was they basically implied that Knight Commander Meredith was still alive, and that she was actually
hear rumors about that,
yeah, that she was like encased in lyrium and controlling like red lyrium soldiers, and I thought that was a pretty cool concept. So then for when Veilguard was coming out, I was really excited to see if she makes some sort of debut appearance. Just not, but I thought that would be interesting. But I think for this we should also, since it's the latest release, discuss a bit more about Veilguard. And I would say, I think one thing that I was excited for when I did first hear about it was the idea that you can pick your factions. Because before, I feel like it was very restricted to, you're just going to be like a mage, you're going to be a rogue, and like that sort of it. And then like, I think fair enough, in Dragon Age 2, you like Hawke could decide if you wanted to be like a mercenary or a smuggler and things like that. But I think actually having a faction that you're meant to be like dedicated to, I thought was going to be a really cool concept. But I think people were saying that the main problem with Veilguard was that two things. The writing felt too, people compared it to having HR in the room. That's what they said the writing felt like. And then they also said that with Veilguard, it sort of lost the sort of dark, gritty nature, for example, that Origins had, and it became more of like a Disney Marvel. People comparing it to like Guardians of the Galaxy type of humor and things like that. So I think it's kind of interesting, that shift that's occurred. I will say though, the one gripe I do have with Origins fans is I feel like they're never satisfied though. Like people that love Origins hardcore, they're like, this is never good. Like that's why I think it's funny, because even with Dragon Age 2 now, people look back on Dragon Age 2 and they're like, actually, you know what? It wasn't even that bad, actually.
That's what I hate the most.
Because they were dragging it. They were dragging Dragon Age 2 so hard, seeing it with worst games. And then now that Veilguard's out, they're like, wow, Dragon Age 2 was a gift from God.
And like on your point, you mentioned Marvel, the fact that people are like, oh yeah, these latest Marvel films aren't up to scratch, but then but Iron Man 2 was pretty good. I'm like, no. That film is awful. Like Mickey Rourke's Russian accent is awful. Like the acting isn't that great. Like, even Thor 2 isn't that good of a film. But they're like, oh yeah, but this is peak Marvel. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, you're trying to fool and lie to yourself to try and prove a point. But no, then they're not. It's not as good. And it's like the same with people who are like, oh yeah, the Phantom Menace isn't that bad of a Star Wars film. And I'm like, no, it's literally they've made a children's Star Wars film. That's literally what the Phantom Menace is, and that it stands out. And it's very different from all other films because that's what they tried to do. Realized it didn't work, and that's where they changed during like Attack of the Clones and also for Revenge of the Sith.
But then that's why I think that when it comes to a lot of fans, especially the ones, the loudest people, I realize, are the ones that aren't really that connected to the source material. So it's like they're making all of this noise saying, oh my gosh, like people making videos saying that Dragon Age 2 is amazing. But then I was like, I remember Dragon Age 2 getting absolutely dragged through. Even Inquisition got a bit of heat. Like, fair enough, Inquisition was successful, but like a lot of people also were like, still wasn't Origin level though. It's unfortunate, but it's not Origin level. So I think it's funny because people will like kiss the ground Origin walks on and pretend it's like the. And don't get me wrong, I feel like it is a very good game and very good storytelling and very good concept of understanding the impact of decisions. However, I think this sort of idea of it's been over romanticized to the point that nothing else can.
It has.
And I think even like you said, with multiple different franchises, I think even with, for example, I'm like a massive X-Men fan, for example, and even with the original source material, people talk about like, well, people don't really say the movies are that great, but for the most part, like people like the movies. That's why Hugh Jackman's career sort of popped off, for example. But if you actually read the comics, Wolverine was never that much of an important character for the most part. He was a part of the team, but he wasn't like the main focus. So the fact that the future movie sort of became about Wolverine leading the team, which in the comics technically would never really happen unless everything went downhill, it was never really a thing because Wolverine was, in essence, the lone wolf of the group. He'd just like randomly leave to go to Japan and abandon the team whenever he felt like it. So for him to, and then I think Dark Phoenix was probably that movie was dreadful when it came out, but that was Mystique leading the X-Men. Are you joking? Like, that doesn't even make sense.
And then Sophie Turner's American accent, like, no, sorry. Like, I could pass it in Age of Apocalypse, but not in that film. It was awful. Like, and
it was so bad.
And I think the issue was like when Jean killed Mystique, I was like, come on, I want to see Magneto go crazy, like full crazy. And it's like, he's like, nah, I'm angry, but I'm mild-mannered angry.
Like, I think, to be honest, I remember people saying that killing off Mystique was their excuse to get rid of, like, Jennifer Lawrence was like, I'm done, get me out of this franchise, I'm over it, kill me off. But I think the whole, it's so embarrassing, like, they had two times, and they got the Phoenix Saga wrong, and Phoenix Saga is one of, like, the greatest, like, X-Men storylines in my opinion, but they got it wrong both times. And I think I was told that the reason why it failed that way was because the script was meant to be quite different, but because Captain Marvel came out, I think the same villain that was in the Captain Marvel movie was actually meant to be in the Dark Phoenix movie, but then they sort of couldn't do that crossover properly, especially with all the riots and stuff like that. So then they sort of just made this random alien race to be the ones that wanted the Phoenix Force. But yeah, that was the same problem all the way from the beginning. For example, if you watch the old TV show, like Rogue was like a crazy character. Like, Rogue was actually like the real popular character in like the past. And then, like, even in the animated series with her confidence and, like, fair enough, she was scared of her powers, but she's still a very confident person. Whereas in the whole movie franchise, I'm scared to touch people. Oh my god! It's like, damn, it's been 7 movies and we're still crying about this. And to be fair, the reason she had to stay that way is because they didn't have the rights to Captain Marvel, so she could never actually get the powers that she had in the comics or the TV shows. But sorry, we have to. I'm a big X-Men fan, but we have to ourselves.
You raised so many good points about like X-Men, and just to cut in, what is your favorite X-Men film? Because I think out of all of the X-Men films that have come out, I would say that the best film I would say is the Wolverine to just every X-Men film that's come out, and then after that, I would say X-Men. Not First Class, the one that came after that.
Days of Future Past?
Days of Future Past, yes. Because I think the main issue for me is like watching the. I know this is a tangent to X-Men, but we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back. The fact that they never really utilized the characters they had. The fact that you had Toad in the first film, but you never saw him again. You then had Nightcrawler in the second film.
No. We saw Toad in Days of Future Past in a diner. Yeah.
But also, like, in the original trilogy, they'd bring someone in. If they weren't part of the main group, they were there and then disappear. Like, the fact that Nightcrawler is a major part of the X-Men, they brought him into one film and then never see him again. And I think that's what kind of turned me off from the original 3 films, was like, you have so many characters. Why are we still going back to this group?
Yeah. To be honest, I think another gripe that I had was they weren't even, the group that they used wasn't even the original X-Men cast anyway. Yeah. It was going to be Jean, Cyclops, Beast, Iceman, and Angel. Angel showed up once in Last Stand, and that was never had seen. Well, I know he was in Apocalypse, to be fair, but they had the opportunity. But I think also it's hard to interlink a lot of characters because a lot of their stories were tied to a lot of, for example, like I said, Rogue Squadron was tied to Captain Marvel in a lot of cases and stuff like that. And I think the same thing applies for a lot of characters, even down to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, for example. The whole debate on whether their mutants were like a scientific experiment or like Magneto's children, and the fact that wasn't really like, well, fair enough, they brought in Quicksilver in X-Men, but then obviously we're doing the whole implication that Magneto was his dad and everything like that, but then obviously never really being able to bring Scarlet Witch when, for example, their stories intertwine quite heavily. So I think it's now beneficial that the X-Men is now going back into the MCU, I suppose, and hopefully they can start making these stories right. But I think with the original, I will say though, I do prefer, the only thing I prefer about the original trilogy, maybe this is my childhood speaking a bit more, but I think I liked how some of the characters stuck to their source material in essence. Like, I think, for example, it didn't play the massive role, but like the woman who played Mystique, for example, in the original trilogy, apparently Mystique wasn't supposed to speak at all. Like, they were just going to make Mystique just stand there and just be by Eric's side the whole time. But then that's why in the movie she has that sort of like robotic-y generated like voice when she's talking. But I think it's more befitting because in the comics, Mystique's role is sort of, in essence, an anti-hero type of, like, mainly villain, but like has anti-hero moments. But then it's like you never really know what side she's on. Like, fair enough, she's loyal to Magneto for the most part, but she could just like throw him away when she feels like it, type of thing. So I think that was a good thing that they sort of kept to that sort of source material, whereas forcefully pushing her as a hero in X-Men First Class and Beyond just didn't really make much sense.
Yeah. And then let's not forget Vinnie Jones as the Juggernaut.
That was a giggle though. That was so funny. I thought that was hilarious. Speaking on that bloody movie though, how do you make a film that's centered around the Dark Phoenix and then overcook it with the Cure storyline, and then try to minimize the Dark Phoenix? That film was an absolute mess because the Phoenix Saga in itself is so big, and the Cure storyline is quite a big deal as well. And I think if they made the film dedicated to that, I feel like it might have been a lot better. But then trying to also push the Phoenix storyline alongside it just was a complete conundrum. And I think I can't lie, the part that made me laugh the most about that film was when I think Mystique lost her powers, and then Magneto's like, "You're not one of us anymore, dear," and just leaves her. And I'm like, no, like, I get what you meant when you said, like, you would have thought that Magneto would have had more of a reaction when, like, Jean killed Mystique, but the fact that he left her after like, all those years together, and he just was like, "You're not even a mutant anymore." Get on my face.
Or the fact that he's not so angry when she kills Charles. They're friends. They just have two different viewpoints on mutants and how they should live with humanity. But it's like No, chill. Like he's more angry in the Dark Phoenix about Mystique than he is about Charles Xavier, his technically best friend for years.
He was like, "Oh, you killed Charles, but you're quite powerful, so why don't we hang out instead?" And it's like, are you not?
You're kidding me? Yeah.
That was your friend like 5 minutes ago. Like, you guys were playing chess in prison together. What happened? So I don't know. But yeah. So for the fans, can't derail too hard. This is a good point there. I do like your X-Men knowledge. But to go back to Dragon Age, though, I think one gripe people did say there about, and I guess this sort of links back to X-Men as well, talking about oppressed people, is people always mentioned, the dark side of Tevinter all the time when you play the other Dragon Age games. And people think that when you do go into Tevinter and experience it, you're not really hearing about or feeling that level of like slavery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, in other games, they sort of put so much emphasis on, oh my gosh, Tevinter's a dark place. They're practicing like blood magic and it's so crazy. And the mages are in charge. Yeah, the sacrifices and the demons and stuff like that. And then I feel like you go into Tevinter and fair enough, they give you great views, great scenery, like the graphics are really good. But then you don't really see that gritty dark side that's been sort of hyped up about this whole time. You don't really see the extreme levels of slavery and stuff like that was always discussed. And for his name, there was the character in 2 who was a slave that escaped. I forgot his name.
The elf, Sebastian. No, that's not Sebastian. What was his name again? He's got lyrium tattoos.
That's the one. His name. His name, I can't remember. Yeah, but even his storyline of him like being sent back to like his slave master and stuff like that, I feel like was quite a big deal, when you could sort of feel like a level of guilt to that. Whereas when you play Velgard, there isn't this sort of impact of, oh my gosh, there's just slavery happening all around you and all of this corruption and things like that. Like, obviously, I guess you do feel the corruption, but then I think based on the writing and based on the way the story is presented, you're not really able to sort of feel that sort of build up of what Tevinter was supposed to be when it was presented by the previous games.
And I think going back on our talk about X-Men, I think the issue is politics as well, because hearing some of the like creative directors and those who worked on the game, the major issue they've had is that they've had pushback from EA. And from the conversations being said, it kind of felt like EA was like, you need to wrap this up if you want this game to ever to come out, or we're going to scrap it. And you kind of see it, that they then were like, oh, wait, if we have to get this game out, we'll then make it like the Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the Infinity Wars or the previous films to build up to that Endgame. Yeah. And you kind of see it that they jump. So instead of time travel, they just have these portals, the Illuvians, they can just jump in and jump out of. And to your point, sometimes I think that when it comes to like video games, when you then join a major company like EA or Ubisoft, and even like Activision have actually greatly improved since being bought by Microsoft. So they're basically saying, do what you want to do, we're hands off, but we just want a bit of that Call of Duty moolah that you get every year. But then you have situations that the head of EA was like, oh, the reason why the game wasn't successful was because there was no multiplayer in it. And then fans were scratching their head like, wait, what? Like, so he was basically saying the reason why it wasn't financially successful was because there was no multiplayer, and they then couldn't put the loot boxes into the game because I think this last year was the first year that EA made more money from loot boxes and stuff like that. So like DLCs than actual game sales.
Oh, wow.
And that is, I think, the model that EA is taking now, which is unfortunate, because what they should have done was be like, we're going to give you, because they do have the money, we're going to sit down and go through with you. We're going to develop the world. We're going to have it as bigger than Inquisition. We're going to have it that it focuses on the lore. It builds upon the grittiness that we've spoken about Tevinter. And then we're going to flesh out the storyline, the characters, and also increase and improve the dialogue. But what they kind of did was kind of tell the team that, oh, if you really want this game to be that you've been developing for, I think, I think it's more than for 13 years. Yeah, for it to come out, you need to get it ready to then ship, and you do see it throughout the game that there are good elements, and even like the big shock factors that you hear within the game. You're like, if they've done this properly, this would kick and hit a lot more than it actually does, because I'm just hearing it like this, and like the fact that they talk about like the importance of Antiva, they talk about Tevinter, they talk about the Anderfels, they talk about the whole of like Navarra through the lore, to then have, let's say, like a short space of these places
Antiva,
you could actually interact with, when we all know that from Assassin's Creed you can build a huge diverse world.
That's true.
And I think someone was saying it to me, I think it might have been Jeffrey, that I think what would help Ubisoft, who've got issues, and EA, who's got issues, to then just become one company. Just think, an Assassin's Creed world
with Dragon Age like style.
The Dragon Age. Like the ships. So just think of Odyssey, how big that game was. Just think how big Valhalla was. Just think how big they were able to then put things into it. And imagine if that world of a game was made for Dragon Age Veilguard.
Yeah, no, I think, but then that also leads me on to a point, because I wanted to discuss with you actually about Dragon Age in general, which was, I remember there was slight backlash with Dragon Age Inquisition because a lot of people weren't a fan of the open world level concept of it, and fair enough, being stuck in the hinterlands for 10 hours isn't the greatest thing in the world, but so I get that, but people sort of preferred that sort of closed space sort of thing where, you just have your path and you just go through. To be honest, I'm an open world kind of person, so I've really supported that sort of level of detail of being able just to explore endlessly and maybe feeling like you're, I don't know, finding secret caves, secret tunnels, getting secret loot things, whereas in a more linear sort of mission area, and you can just, point A, exit B, and then we've seen everything, been there, done that. Whereas, like, for example, like, as much as I joke about the hinterlands, like, you can go back to the hinterlands multiple times and find multiple different things, multiple different stories can take place there. So there's a level of, it diversifies the experience of being in the hinterlands, whereas certain other places, I don't know, like Crestwood, for example, once you complete Crestwood, fair enough, it's open world, so it's fine, but once you complete Crestwood, there's nothing, you never really need to go back there. So,
and I think that's why, like, if they got Ubisoft to develop, for example, people were saying, oh, maybe the same thing would happen to The Witcher 2, but what they did was fill the world with things to do. So, like, if you are going to make an open world, then you have to go all out. You need to have, like, mini games. You need to have varying monsters. You need to have varying different, like, wildlife. You need to be able to then collect varying different plants, which actually can have an effect. You need to have these literal random quests that are very intriguing. So it's not just like, for example, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 have done this really well, that you have random quests which have no, like, link to the main story, but they have, like, a full-on linear arc and could be its own separate story. And I think that's what they were missing in Inquisition, but then people got it in Witcher 3, so they were like, oh, we're fine with an open world as long as it's filled with things to do.
Yes.
And diverse things to do. Because the amount of times that you'd have to fight bears or giant spiders, and you're like, another bunch of giant spiders to kill. But, like, the fact that in The Witcher, also the combat was better. I think also the combat in Inquisition was it felt a bit like button pressing.
Yeah.
Compared to, like, The Witcher, which was more dynamic. Yeah. But I think they kind of got one thing they did get right was the combat was done right in Veilguard, but it's just like the building the world, it being dark, being more gritty, better, like, interactions with your companions, and also the development of the actual, like, the narrative and the story, and even, like, the conversation between yourselves, and even to your point, having Dragon Age Keep, which is like the world state, carrying that on, and I'm like literally fans, when they heard about that the game's being made, went back to play Origins and 2 in Inquisition and be like, this is my character. I've done all these things. I could have done Dragon Age Keep, but I wanted to relive the whole story. And then they came and were told, oh, I think it was like 3 or 4 months. Oh, you just temper your expectations. Like, they should have said that from the offset, which meant they didn't decide that until maybe 3 or 4 months the game came out.
Yeah, but to be fair,
in like one of the iterations of the game, they would have had Dragon Age Keep. But when they probably changed it to Veilguard, they said, you know what, we're not going to have the Dragon Age Keep, we're not having the World State, and then decided to tell people a lot later instead of telling them earlier to then temper their expectations.
But I think, well, going back to what you're saying about the company itself, like even from Origins onwards, like Origins was so, I think the reason it's so beloved was because it put storytelling first. Like, regardless of what people want to say about Origins, that's what I'll give it its props because the combat, well, that can be discussed. But like the storytelling is there. Whereas I think there's only a 2-year gap between Origins and Dragon Age 2, and I remember that like, that's what people were saying, that the reason people didn't like Dragon Age 2 was a lot of old material was reused. But people then did say though that the thing that made Dragon Age 2 good was that the storytelling element was still pretty solid. The combat might have been a bit janky, and you know they might have still kept reusing the same sort of elements, but then the storytelling was good. And I think after Origins, there became a lot more of a push to have action oriented. Like even I think there was an interview with one of the directors of Dragon Age 2, and he was basically saying that, oh yeah, we're going to have more like flashy effects and things like that, and that's what they were more excited for. And I think that's sort of why, for example, now it's almost like a reversal, whereas the game is having really, really solid combat, but then the story has slowly declined over that time period. And I think that's why people don't feel like their expectations are met anymore, because the storytelling was at such a high standard and the combat wasn't necessary. It still had to be fun, but it wasn't the most important factor. Whereas the combat has now reached an excelled level, but then the story has to
graphics as well.
Yeah,
and funny enough, at work we had someone come in and they were talking about branding and also how companies develop things for their brand. And one of the things he said is that the most important thing is to listen to your customers, to develop, and then also not to focus on imitating others' success. And I think that's the issue that Dragon Age tried to do, was like, oh, we need to try and take from Skyrim, which was like a huge open world. So you kind of saw that a bit with Inquisition. And then also maybe we need to take from here, from there, instead of actually being like, no, our core fan base is like... And the thing, what people said was like, you would go to BioWare for the best characters and the story. And I think that's where they kind of fell off. Even with like Andromeda, you felt no real connection to the characters, and you felt no real like major stakes or connection to the story.
Like I think even with our conversation now, even us being able to, for example, even we discussed Inquisition initially, even us having my favorite Inquisition character is this, and the one I liked the least was this, and it's because regardless of whether you like or hate them, you still have that sort of feeling. Whereas I feel like with the future game, there was a level of indifference, like you couldn't really care if they were there or not. It almost more of a, you know what, I'm just going to bring these characters with me because they have the best abilities and that's about it. Like, it doesn't really, whereas it's like, I didn't really care if Sarah had the best ability. She's annoying. She's annoying, so I didn't want her around. And that was it. Like, you might have felt the same way about, you know, being a knight enchanter is actually, I was a knight enchanter. That was my specialization. But it's a great specialization, so you could have had Vivian on your team. But like, you didn't like Vivian as a character, and that's why you probably didn't want to hang out with her. So that's what, you know what I mean? So, whereas, I think if you had more of an indifference towards it, you would have been like, you know what, Vivian's OP, so I'll just bring her with me to do this boss fight and call it a day. And I think that level of connection is important. And I think one thing that also irritated me about Veilguard is that there wasn't as much flexibility with the customers, with the characters, in the sense that for certain missions required, like, especially like big missions, required like certain companions to be there. Whereas like you could take in Inquisition, you can take anyone to the Winter Palace. You can take anyone to the Mage versus Templar conflicts, whether you side with the Mages or the Templars. You can take anyone to that. Whereas in certain quests in Inquisition, I mean, in certain quests in Velgard, it was you need to bring Tosh, you need to bring Harding, and it's like to
Yeah.
have that sort of restriction or limitation can be quite frustrating. Because don't get me wrong, there were times like that in Inquisition, but it was very brief, and it wasn't really like for a big story arc. Like I think one time when you were required to bring someone, for example, if it's either a personal, like, yeah, only mainly for personal quests, really.
Yeah.
It's like, for
Yeah.
example, you needed to bring Varric or Blackwall for Cole's personal quest, for example. Like you couldn't bring Sarah, like things like that. So I think, but those were very like niche and short times. But having like the Winter Palace and them saying you can only bring human companions only. That's it, or things like that. Like that wouldn't have really worked. You know what I mean? So I think that was one of the hindrances of the development of Velgard, in my opinion, because it sort of really tried to constrain the way that you play the game, and it sort of took away that role playing element. And a lot of people, even though I'm not that type of person, a lot of people didn't like that aspect that you couldn't be like this horrible villain type of character. At least in Origins, you could be an absolute monster. You could be an absolute, even maybe not as much so in Inquisition. Like you could still annoy a lot of people in Inquisition and be crazy, but at the end of the day, obviously, Crypheus is the big bad boss, so he'll always out evil you. So it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas, but in Velgard, it was like no matter what you really did, everyone was sort of
still
like happy
good guy.
the rainbows there. Like that's it. And I think a lot of people didn't like that you couldn't. It wasn't natural because obviously people do have tension with one another, and I think I think the only time you sort of see the tension, I think Tash and that guy from the Morn Watchers, I forgot his name.
Oh yeah. That's the guy who controlled Bones. Yeah,
like they clash a bit, but then it's like when you actually listen to what they're arguing about, it's very trivial, very childish sort of thing. Whereas other characters will have whole face debates, like I was in the circle and I was like struggling for my life, and the other character being like, yeah, but we need the circle. You deserve to struggle. Like, and like that being a sort of source of contention. Exactly. Whereas like I think in Velgard it was like, Tasha's calling me names, make her stop, I'm gonna cry. And it's like, how did we go from people actually talking about like political like downfalls and the suffering that they faced in poverty and slavery and things like that to, oh my gosh, she called me a name, I'm upset, like make her stop. Like how is that? How is that like
100%. 100%.
The downfall.
And I think to your point like about HR being in charge of like the writing, it's the fact that in the previous games, like less of Inquisition, but in the previous two games, you had people who really didn't like each other, but you were the thing that brought them together. Like, funny enough, in one of the DLCs for like Dragon Age Origins, you could play as like one of the, I think it's a Hawke, who's one of the Darkspawn, and then you see what happens if the Warden wasn't there. So if the Warden wasn't there, Alistair and Morrigan are the only two people who develop the party, because she goes because Flemmer told her to, but she literally just berates him the whole time. And the fact that you've got people who are very different and have different viewpoints, and you see them argue, like Ogren arguing with like Liliana because he's very misogynistic. But
well,
then
even Liliana arguing with Morrigan, for example, like them
concerning her faith, yes.
Yeah,
and the fact that Morrigan being an apostate and Wynn being like a circle mage, them having issues between that, or like Alistair having issues with Zavron being an assassin.
Yeah,
and the fact that I think the best is in the second game, because it's not fighting a big bad. It's trying to first off start off to develop yourself and be someone after being a refugee and fleeing Kirkwall, and then trying to then get money, and then the Kunari try and take over Kirkwall, so then you then have to fight them.
Yes.
But it's more of like the characters are very different and generally don't like each other, but they just get on with it, and they actually have personalities that butt heads constantly, and it's like you trying to have to bring them together to prevent them from then falling apart. But for Veilguard, it was very much like, we're best friends, and like, oh, the only issue that we have is, to your point, like, oh, this person's calling me names, or this person moved my stuff, or this person ate something that wasn't, or someone said that something that was important to me, they didn't really see it as being important, and be like, oh, all our stuff's important. Oh yes, you're right, Val, you're right. Everyone's stuff is important.
And that's it.
It's like, no, like,
because people don't naturally like
an assassin.
Yeah.
You brought in a kind of like a dragon hunter. You brought in Varric, who's unwell. You brought someone from the Inquisition, being in Scout Harding. You brought in a resistance person who's fighting against the Venaturi. There should be more to be butting heads about.
Yeah. Especially with the factions existing, you would think that even if they don't naturally interlink, there should be an ethics side of it, where, for example, like, I don't know, the guy from the Morn Watch is being upset with the Antivan Crow guy because he's like, you kill for money. Like, I don't know, maybe that's like, the ethics of that, like the fact that that's like not really even a discussion. Like,
they kind of talk about it with Scout Harding and the guy from the Morn Watch, because she's someone who follows Andraste, and I think they believe in burning the bodies. So then she feels it's kind of like a sacrilege for him.
I remember that was a mission in Inquisition, actually, to collect the bodies and burn them. So she has like kind of like an aversion to him moving the bones around. But I'm like, no, that could have been a lot bigger. Like, to say that this is because like. And the fact that they were like trying to make necromancy sound cool, I'm like, no, it's freaking necromancy. Like, I remember,
it needs to be as dark as possible.
Because even in Inquisition, if you pick the specialization of a necromancer, everyone's looking at you crazy. Like, they're like, Josephine's like, gonna have to think of how we're gonna rebrand you and like make it digestible. Cole's like, I don't really like that side of you. Like, it's so weird that you do that. I think that was a pretty good aspect. Like, when you specialize, certain characters have certain reactions to it. Like, for example, when I was a Knight Enchanter, Vivian and Solus were like, so glad to see you joining the ranks. Like, as an elf, it's amazing. Da, da, da. And it's cool. And like, as a necromancer, they're sort of looking at you like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And I think that sort of aspect of looking at it like sideways is important to sort of show characters like having their own personalities and feelings. And I think this idea that, you can sort of just be like, we're all special guys, and then everyone's like, okay, and then that fixes it. Isn't realistic. Like, people don't settle arguments like that unless you're, I don't know, talking to 6-year-olds. And even 6-year-olds, I feel like, are part of a fight. So.
Or you have a relationship. Like, Avengers Endgame works because you've seen the relationship, you've seen Civil War, you've seen the first Avengers where they're literally at each other's throats, but you've got people who are just seeing each other for the first time, and then it's like, oh yes, we're mild-mannered. No, you need more of that Mass Effect tension, like in Mass Effect 2 when you've got like Miranda and Jack are angry at each other because Jack wants to access Cerberus files about her, and then Miranda is saying no, because that shouldn't be allowed. And if you don't have a high enough Renegade or Paragon, whatever you pick, whoever you side with, the person you don't side with dies in the last mission. And the fact that if you don't have a high enough Paragon or Renegade, you can't be like, both of you get your act together, or both of you are a team, we need to work together. You have to pick a side, and you have to pick a side because you haven't picked the. And I think that is kind of the thing that's missing within the Veilguard. It's like, you tell us that consequences matter, but what are the consequences with? And one of the issues they also said is that, you can upset your companion, they can go away, but then they'll still come back in the end to try and save the day. And I'm like, no, like, if you really upset someone, they'd be like, yeah, sod off, like
Sarah leaves. Like, if you kick Sarah out of the Inquisition, she packs up and she's gone. You never, like, Cole vanishes. He's like, I'm going to make you forget me. I'm gone. And, like, you never hear from these characters again. And I think, there's that sort of commitment to that. They said, you know what, I'm not going to be a part of this organization because you guys don't want me. I'll do what I need to do in my own way, and with or without, I'm gone. And I respected that a lot. Whereas, like you said, having all these mild-mannered people sort of come together and they're all just best friends, destined to save the world, just doesn't really sound natural because people will have conflict and people will butt heads. And I think even on a weaker level, like as he was talking, this actually came back to me. I remember like even for like trivial issues, for example, in Inquisition, I remember like when Cassandra. When when Varric knew where Hawke was all along, and Cassandra found out about it, and she was upset, and then you'd have to it would take a minute, but then like you had to get Varric to write the book for her, and that like cheered her up, and that sort of brought all together.
And she was literally about to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Like that made like it was a trivial sort of argument, but the whole process of them actually reconciling, even though it was really a small part of the story, felt natural because it followed it. Whereas if it was one cutscene of Varric, say sorry to Cassandra, sorry to Varric, then hug. Like then you wouldn't really feel that much, but the whole her secretly being a fan and then Varric being able to tease at that, then use that to like make up with her. It really fit. It was really nice. So and it felt
and the fact you could see why she's angry from the second game, because throughout the second game she's asking Varric, where is he? Because we might need his help to stop this Mage and Templar war. So you kind of see, like, she has a reason to want to kill him.
Do you know what I realized is so embarrassing that through this entire conversation? I love how we're so vividly able to remember every single character in Inquisition, every single... Okay, other than the one guy that we can't remember from Dragon Age 2, but with Velgard, it's, that Antivan Crow guy, the Morn Watcher guy. The Morn Watcher
guy. I only remember Scout Harding's name because she's an Inquisition. That's it.
I was realizing, I was like, because I felt bad, like, maybe I should have done my research, because I'm just saying, like, the Morn Watcher guy, like, I should have actually been giving you names, but then you started saying it too.
Like, I don't remember the name. And I think that's a part of the issue is that
it's very telling.
Characters, like, I remember Mass Effect 2 came out just before I went to university, and, like, everybody was talking about their favorite character with Mass Effect 2, whether it was like Zaid, whether it was Garrus, whether it was Thal, which was the alien assassin, whether it was Jack or Miranda. Everyone was like, what is Jacob doing? Like, is he really needed? Does he add to the story? Everyone was like, do they really love? What's the Doctor? Morden Solus, yes. And then also the fact that you'd have Grunt as well, the Krogan. So and I think that's the thing that really angers me with BioWare is that you developed characters that people still love. Alistair, they love his witty sarcasm.
You still love Morgan.
And the writer said he based Alistair off Xander from Buffy.
Oh.
And that's why he's so sassy and can be sarcastic through Origins, because that's who he's based off.
So that's it, because him, Liliana and Morgan are probably the most beloved ones from Origins, to be fair.
Yes.
And I think, Isabella's the most beloved one from bloody 2. But I think, but that's what goes back to my previous point, which is the fact that love them or hate them, these characters give you a feeling. Whereas I think, the Elgard characters sort of just leave you indifferent. That's why you don't really need to remember them, because it was like, and even with the boring, like the something like I don't know. Don't mean to offend if you find the person phasing, but I don't know, someone like say Blackwall's a boring character, for example.
Yeah.
But it's like you still remember Blackwall, you still remember he existed, you remember that was a big deal. And it's like, those type of characters that sort of that can blend in but still hold an impact, whereas I'm grasping at straws just trying to remember Tosh, and I feel like I didn't remember Tosh because Tosh is controversial for so many reasons. That's the only thing I think I remember Tosh out of all the roster, because when I think of the other characters, they sort of just come and go. Oh, Davrin.
Fall into the background.
I remember Davrin because he was a black elf. That was about it. Especially going to get. But I think, with the other ones, you don't really get that level of attention to it. And I think even based on the story, from Origins to Velgard, I think there were so many things that they sort of brought in and, tickled about. Like, I think what I was really curious about was learning more about the, it was in Dragon Age Origins, I believe. Oh, this character, I was going to say the Interpreter, but that's not what it's called. The, the Darkspawn that had the Darkspawn that was smart.
In the expansion, what's his name again? Yes. Yeah. Long fingernails.
Yeah, that's one.
and the elongated head. Yeah,
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 yeah.
him.
No,
Yeah,
I was excited because I remember the whole thing was like, oh, whether you kill him or not, and like if he's a smart darkspawn that could like lead to the possibility of other smart darkspawn, and could that help? Because he obviously his goal was to end the blight, but then people saying was like his real goal, was he lying, and like all these sort of things, and I was hoping that they'd explore that things like that in further games, or even for example the concept of brood mothers, for example, which is a very dark concept, and then even
yes, it
then
is.
like discussing how brood mothers are created, for example, in Origins, and then for a brood mother to like technically never really exist again in the rest of the games, it's kind of just
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
why would you do these type of like teasing and like, and I think that's that sort of dark element that people say got sort of washed out as the game sort of continued. But then in the same breath, there were still a lot of dark elements in the other games, like Hawke's mum died was
yes,
quite dark, or
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like,
even
there's nothing you can do to. There's nothing you can do. Either one of his siblings die, or they join the Wardens, and his mum dies.
yeah,
And it's like there's nothing you can do to prevent it. And I think that also might have been a turn off for Dragon Age 2, was the fact that Hawke, the
strict.
character you have, has such a hard life. And the issue also is that at least you could bring the characters, so the companions, back, but it was like the companions always had issues, and the issues you couldn't solve them.
Yeah.
Like, they had major issues and they still couldn't be kind of like solved. Like, I remember like Meryl, she had like this whole thing about, which was the elf who was the Dalish elf,
Yeah,
and
she
she
was
was like, oh
blood
yeah.
magic, right? She did blood magic, right?
Yes. So she basically made a pact. She was like, "Oh, the keeper of our Dalish tribe doesn't want me to gain power," but actually was doing something to save her.
Mm.
But then you following her path to then achieve her goal ends up with the death of many of the Dalish and of the keeper, and then she gets shunned from her own, because she was supposed to be like the keeper in waiting, so she gets shunned by her tribe, and it's like, there's nothing you can literally do because she's so headstrong that this person is preventing my progress.
It's the
And I
same
think that,
with Anders. Anders is the exact same. Regardless
yes,
of if you help him or not, he's going to
that
blow up the
crazy
country.
motherfucker.
He's going to blow up the country regardless of whatever you make, whatever you decide, whatever you help him. Because I love the way if you help him, and especially like I think if you like romance him, apparently, um, he will be like, oh, we're making like a cute little potion. I think, to be honest, that storyline makes me laugh because it's like, I feel like, I don't know, someone should have a bit of logic to know when you're making a bomb. Just saying. Just saying. So if you just sort of be like, oh, just making a potion, don't know what you're doing it for, but okay. And then I love the way if you don't help him, he just does it by himself and it's like, surprise, I did it. And I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that is, I understand that because I think it is important to, I get why people don't like that, but I still feel like it's important to have headstrong characters. Like, obviously it's great to have
Yes, yes, yes.
evolution and redemption and seeing the world from a whole new light, but some people are just very set foot in their ways. Like, they're very adamant that nothing's going to change their perspective, and especially in Anders' case, you can understand why he's like that because of everything that's happened with the Mage Templar conflict.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And then obviously him
Yeah.
being possessed by a spirit of justice that then became
Justice,
vengeance, and then the sort
Yes,
of
yeah.
the conflicting idea of whether it's still justice or not. It holds a lot of weight, and I think that's why them being headstrong makes sense. But I also think, to be fair, in Dragon Age 2's case, based on the timing of how much time they had, I think that's why. Like, I think for me, for example, I didn't like the fact that in Dragon Age 2, regardless of what you do, the ending will always be the same. Meredith still
Yeah,
dies,
yeah,
Orsino still dies, case closed. Like, because Orsino still. And it makes me laugh because if you side with the mages and help Orsino, there's no technical reason for him to go to blood magic, but then he just does it anyway, so then it's just like.
He's like, fuck it, they're going to win. If they really want to see blood magic, I'll show them some blood magic. And you're like, no, like, you can still win this.
And it's just like Meredith being crazy and like not changing. I can get that because even if you side with her, she still has the Red Lyrium idol, so it's kind of irrelevant. But Orsino, I was like, you didn't need to go that far, mate. But this is what it is. But I think I think that's what sort of brings those games that bring Dragon Age 2 the charm that it has now, in the sense that when you look at it, it is important to have these headstrong characters that are like that, because having this sort of like, in contrast with the Veilguard, it's sort of like a character with an idea and then you just shut it down and they're like, okay. And it's like, Wow, no pushback.
Yeah,
No pushback. Like even
yeah,
with Solus, for example, Solus is like, it's this or that. Like, I'm going to do this. Sorry, you're gonna have to just sit back and watch. Like, I don't really care what you want or what you think. But even if you romance Solus, he'll give you like one pack and then be like, got my job to do. See you later. See you later. So, it does, yeah. And I think that's quite helpful when sort of deciding or creating a character, because it's, like I said, it's important to have redemption arcs, and it's like, for example, Black Hall's little redemption arc and stuff like that.
yes,
But then it's also important to have characters that are like, I've seen the world the way that I've seen the world for as long as I have. No amount of conversation or political chat is really going to fix this. I'm going to do it my way. You can join me or you can sit back and watch. I'm doing it regardless.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's a realistic approach, because people are like that in real life. So
yes.
yeah, like not everyone can be persuaded. So I think that was a great aspect, regardless of whether, like, I know some of the fans might not be like appreciative of that, or like they might not like that, but I think it's so important to have like a diverse roster of characters with, yeah, like diverse thoughts.
Yeah, like especially when you go to Denerim and then you go to the Landsmeet, and it's like you battle and you then defeat Loghain, and then you're like, okay, then we're taking over, and then Alistair's like, no, you need to kill that bastard, and then you're like, if you say no, he's like, you know what, I'm leaving. If you don't have a high enough approval with him, he'll basically challenge you to a fight, and then you can end up killing Alistair.
Yeah. And
then Honora will become queen, and then Loghain can join the Wardens.
actually, sorry.
And there's so many different options that they give you at the end. So, like, you could marry Honora, she be queen, and then you then go and get, was it Arlanthin? I think for the expansion, and then the character then disappears, because he then has his potential calling and then you don't really see him in the rest of the Warden for the rest of the games. And the fact that you, even with the child, so if you're a female Warden, you can have the child, but you still have to then give it to Morrigan, or even Liliana can have the child, and then the essence will then, and the fact that you've got so many different options at the end, and the fact that those options were then seen in Dragon Age, in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yeah.
And that the fact that you could be in a situation where when the King of Orlais the King of Ferelden visits Kirkwall on like a mission, it can be Honora, it can be Loghain, it can be Alistair, and it can also be Alistair with his uncle, who you see at Redcliffe, not the old man who's Connor's father, but Connor's uncle. He goes with him. So if he survives the battle of Redcliffe, he's there with Alistair. And then also you can, if Alistair leaves, you then see him as a drunkard in Kirkwall. Or if Alistair becomes like he takes up the mantle of being the Warden, you see him as a Warden in Kirkwall.
You know, I think, and then to expand on that, even in Inquisition, I think if you do if you pick the mages, if you side with the mages, by the end of that quest, you either get Honora, you get Alistair and Honora, you can get Alistair by himself, as the ones that sort of say, you know, we need to get these mages out of Redcliffe. They've caused too much damage. You know, you take them, Inquisition, they're yours. Yeah. And I think, like, those sort of small aspects of it are what's so important, in my opinion, to sort of see the development, or even if it's just like a small cameo, but it's like these cameos then mean something rather than just putting them in for cameo's sake, even though they serve no actual purpose. And it's the exact same thing with, also based on that decision, that also impacts who the Warden is, whether that's going to be Loghain, Alistair, or Stroud. So I think combining all of that together is also quite effective as well. And when it comes down to the storytelling aspect of, actually, no, I did have a question for you with regards to storytelling. What campaign mission in Inquisition was better for you? Or which one did you pick? The Mages or the Templar? I feel like, but before you answer that, I feel like in the longevity of the game, I feel like after you make the decision, I feel like it doesn't really hold much impact beyond that point. Because it's like the Mage Templar rebellion, so big, and then once you actually pick a side, other than the fact that whichever side you pick, the opposing side goes to Corypheus, but then that's kind of the end of the rebellion. But what did you pick?
At first, I picked the Templars at first, and I think their mission is
Really good.
a lot more cooler because then I think they request all the Templars to come to they request all the Templars to come to a castle
Yes.
for them to be imbued with red lyrium. So then you have to try and convince them and convince the Templars there that this is awful. And I think you convince one of the leading high-ranking ones, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll put an end to this farce." But it kind of feels like, so that's like more intrigue based, but then it feels like more, especially with like the time traveling with the mages one. I was like, I'm not really into this. Like, why are we like time traveling to the future and then having to get back to the past?
No, I think with the Templar quest, I thought it was really good because I thought the concept of like the envy demon sort of being the leader of it all, and then you having to like unveil the mask that it was a demon all along who was Lord Lucius and stuff like that. And I feel like for certain characters, like for example for Cassandra's storyline, I feel like if you become a Templar, it sort of feeds into her story a lot better in a sense. Because I remember when I did my first playthrough, and then I did the Mage's quest, and then randomly just seeing Lord Lucius as a demon just was like, oh, surprise, surprise. So I think they're all finding out that it was a demon all along in Cassandra's quest is a bit more of a surprise. But I think when you actually play the Templar storyline, there is the element of urgency and then like seeing what could potentially happen to them. And then also that's the introduction of Cole as well, and Cole helping you basically battle the demon within your mind. And then also the question of, I think the funniest conversation is Cole a spirit or a demon? That whole debate was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then also the ending for Cole of whether you make him more human or more spirit was quite interesting as well. But what did you think of that? Well, what do you think of Cole's character, actually? We didn't talk about Cole.
I think Cole's character was done really well because I've never really met someone who's not liked Cole.
That's true.
Because the way that he was written, the way that, and also the sad story as well. That
like his story is really dark. How he
it is, and I think that's what. Funny enough, going back to the Velguard, it's kind of like missing. And I think another thing I loved about Inquisition is you love games where they put you in a box. And I think CD Projekt Red do this the best. And then I think even like Bethesda do it as well. They then open out the box and then you're like, oh, so this is the full game. Because like sometimes, like when I was playing Witcher 3, when you're in like Whiterun, and I'm like, is this the game? Is this everything that's here? And it was the same for like Inquisition when I was like, they were like, oh yes, and now we've now stabilized the rift and we've got the support of either the mages or the Templars. And I was like, okay, then is the rest of the game going to be like this? And it's like, no, it's bigger. And the way they announced Corypheus, I think, was very, very well done.
Yes, no, him destroying Haven was that was a great mission, to be honest. And I'm like, and then obviously whoever you don't side with, like I think if you side with the Templars, you have to fight Fiona. But if you side with the mages, you have to fight that high-ranking Templar guy in his form. So I think that was a great introduction to Corypheus. I think I do wish though that Corypheus' story was fleshed out a bit more of like who he. Like, not even who he was, but like his motives a bit more, because I feel like you just know that you're going to fight him at the end and you just sort of hear whispers about him. But then obviously the main person that you end up focusing on throughout the story until the end is like that second in command. So I think if you pick the Templars, it's Calpurnia, and if you pick the mages, it's Samson from the Templars. And then like figuring out their story. And even with them, like Calpurnia would have been so useful for Dragon Age Velguard because of her whole story with Tevinter, and if you like let her live, she then goes off to do her like I don't think she joins the Shadow Dragons, but I know she does something in Tevinter that's of importance, and I think they could have explored that, but because they don't value the sort of whether you side up the Templars or mages in Velguard, stories like that kind of just get swept under the rug. And even the whole thing with Samson, I think I really liked the Samson storyline because it was a great juxtaposition to what Cullen was, and it's the sort of idea that him and Cullen were together, and then they're sort of like obviously they sprout off different paths, and Samson, in essence, could have been what Cullen could have become, and same thing vice versa. So I think that was why it was, regardless of which story you pick, is quite interesting because you get to see things from alternative perspectives, and then obviously Cullen's whole battle with Lyrium alongside that is
yeah. And I think also just linking it back to Mass Effect also before we round up on the episode, I think also when we were discussing like characters and moving away from the core element of it, I think when they brought in Andromeda, one, they moved away from like the characters that you love, like people remember Liara, people remember the actual main character Shepard, and then his companions. They remember the Reapers. They remember that Shepard was a Spectre. They remember the Council and the fact they built all this lore. And also, I think the emergency and the pace of Mass Effect was like from the offing of knowing the Reapers are coming, a pace has been set, and then Shepard is running non-stop throughout the series to then give you a game which is like, oh, this is more relaxed, and then there's also these bad guys, but we want you to explore this world. Kind of took people off track because they're like, but this isn't what I fell in love with. This isn't the space opera. This isn't the politics. This isn't a major risk to humanity. And even like, this isn't like, there was a quirkiness to Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 that Andromeda didn't have. Like some of the jokes that were a bit cringy, but were kind of funny.
Yeah.
You just didn't get in Andromeda.
No, I completely agree. And I think, when it comes down back to Mass Effect, I think even like I think it was 3, I believe, the way the game ended was that sort of, all of your decisions ended up holding weight, and that would determine if certain characters died and things like that at like the big finale fight. And I think people, when comparing that to, for example, Velgard, people said like the last 3, like the end game, like the last 3 or 4 hours of Velgard is actually meant to be like a solid piece of game, and people like, they wish that that's what the whole game looked like. But it was that sort of urgency to make sure that all of your companions are in order and everything, that's fine. And I think the difference with Mass Effect is throughout the trilogy, you end up developing a really strong connection with all of the characters. So then there is that urgency to want to try and save them all and want to put your best foot forward so that none of them end up dying in the big final fight. And that's what, like, going back to the whole concept of being well written, that's what having those characters are. And it's like I said, you love them or hate them, but at least you have feeling. When you're indifferent towards them, they're just there. And usually when they're just there, you just use them to, they have the best AoE damage. That's why I'm bringing them on the party. But actually being like, this character might not be the strongest, but I like him. And I like being a necromancer for bloody Dragon Age Inquisition isn't even that good, but I liked Dorian, so that's why I brought him to the party. So that was about it. But I think, I think when it comes down to that, it's a really hard battle to figure out though, because to just overall summarize it, when it comes down to games, I think a lot of people obviously always romanticize the predecessors, the origins, and everything else that comes before that will always be compared and looked at. But then it's sort of figuring out how you can make a solid game that will appease the fans. And then even though obviously there will probably still be critics, but appease them enough that they still get everything that they want without basically just... Because I feel like, in essence, even though some people pretend that this will make them happy, I feel like if they just did a copy and paste Origins, people might not like. I think maybe because of how long it's been, people might appreciate it, but I still feel like retrospectively people won't like it because they still want something fresh and something new. So I would say that, and then leads me on to the final question that we can end this off on. What do you think the future of BioWare is?
Funny enough, I was going to ask you this question. So I think the future of BioWare is very tricky. So I think one of the major things that IGN did say is, with the success of the Oblivion remaster, which technically isn't a remaster, it's more than a remaster, that what games would fans be interested in? And one of the games they talked about was Dragon Age Origins. Imagine Dragon Age Origins with a tweaked combat, done in Unreal Engine 5, and with the main character being able to then speak. I think that would be an amazing game. And I think that should be something they should try and do. because what they probably will do is either shelf it, like EA have shelved so many other of their franchises, like Titanfall has been shelved as well. So it's either that, or what they might try and do is like a complete rebrand and be like, oh yeah, so this is, and I think that's what it kind of felt like they were trying to do with Veilguard. Is like, this is the end of the, from 2 up until Veilguard, this is that end, and maybe we can do something in the future. And on the Mass Effect side, I think I'm very skeptical. Like,
Mass Effect 5 coming out.
the thing is, it is coming out, but they haven't shown us anything. Each time there's more bad news at EA, whether it's to do with BioWare or the other studios, they then talk about, oh, like, we need to tweak something else with Mass Effect. And it's like, the discussions are, when is it taking place? Is Shepard going to be in it? In the trailer that they showed, like 4 years ago, you have Liara's in the trailer, and so then people are like, okay, then we know that the Asari can live for a very long time. So is this way after Shepard's like lifetime could be, or is it like potentially if they've retconned that Shepard survived at the end of Mass Effect 3, and now with Mass Effect 5, he is now going to be more of a central figure, and you can go back to playing Shepard. But what I was telling Jeffrey, like, why can't they just do, we're going to go back in time, and we're going to talk about the Skillian Blitz and how Shepard became Shepard, or even the First Contact War. Like, we're going to, and I think that's what I think the issue with Dragon Age was, is like, you've got the lore, you could go back in time and then be like, you know what, this law's been established, people are interested in it, maybe we can go to, we've done the fourth blight, maybe we can do the third blight, maybe we can do the second blight, maybe we can do
the first
the first blight, or we can even do like when Orlais invaded Ferelden, like that, building up further the lore of the game series. Like for Mass Effect, they could go back to the Skillian Blitz, the First Contact War. It could be humanity first realizing and interacting with the Council, and also BioWare.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that. Oh yeah, my point was, I think it's interesting that when it comes to BioWare in the past, for example, I think there was only a 2-year gap between Origins and Dragon Age 2. And it was this sort of idea that they were consistently pumping out so many games so quickly, like Dragon Age alongside Mass Effect. And I think Inquisition did maybe take about from 2, maybe 6, 7 years. But then like the game that they produced was not only open world, so that made it like good quality because they put so much effort into it. So I think that's why people were so disappointed, for example, with Veilguard, because it was like you had even more time and you produced a game that like you're not even getting the return of like people of engagement. Whereas people may have had their gripes with Inquisition, but a lot of people still liked it, so it didn't really matter if there was a lot of people that didn't like it. They still had a massive cult following for it anyway. Whereas Veilguard doesn't have the same reception. And I think my point is, I think it's very interesting that they were able to pump out so many games in the past, and now it's sort of like, yeah, you're gonna have to wait a while for this one. You're gonna have to wait a while for this one. It's not as consistent as it used to be. And going back to one of your other previous points, I think the impact of things like storytelling has faded mainly because of this sort of, I don't want to say pay to win, but pay to access things. And like the fact that you even said that DLCs are becoming more profitable than like the game itself is quite telling, because in the past, obviously people played the game for just the linear story game. Like they didn't even think it was like it's a gift if you get a DLC. So the fact that the DLC is becoming more of the expectation and like not just the bonus that it once was says a lot. And it's more of a reflection on these big companies really focusing on crunching down on numbers and trying to tick boxes rather than actually producing something of quality content anymore. And I think it's sad, but I think that's what BioWare has sort of become. And it's not the only one. Like EA, Ubisoft, like a lot of other companies, even down to like bloody Disney and things like that. A lot of companies sort of have fallen into this trap of we just need to keep producing as much money as possible. So we just need to try and find ways to get people to buy things regardless of whether it's good quality or not. And I think this lack of care for making things of good quality is what's turning a lot of people off, because at least on the onset of things like Dragon Age Origins, it sort of brought the people to it not because of the DLCs or the plans for DLCs, but just because the story in itself was naturally already good and people could connect with the characters. And I think that is also reflective on, I think, why people care so much about, the flashy combat. That's why I think a lot of companies push for that, trying to make, and obviously that is an aspect that is quite important and should be valued, but I think that concept is taken over more than the storytelling. And yeah, that's what the current future of it looks like. So I think going back to the root, not trying to copy and paste Origins, but just actually telling a story that people can connect with and care about is what's most important. And a lot of companies just trying to reach numbers have sort of forgotten about that. And I think you even said they were planning on scrapping it and they had to keep remaking it because they said, tight deadline. But then again, even saying that, Dragon Age 2 was a tight deadline, but then they were still able to make something of quality. And I think, fair enough, obviously at the time it wasn't also appreciated, but now it has quite a big cult following. I don't know if Velgard will have the same luck maybe 10 years from now.
I don't think it will.
You never know, 10 years from now might be the best game ever made. Well, who knows? But I think that's unfortunately the current future. And I don't know how likely your little dream for a collab between EA and Ubisoft will be. That sounds great. It sounds really nice. I don't see that happening.
No.
I don't see that happening. But it would be nice. And I think, combining the two minds of, making that happen would be very good. But I think currently it is more just, unfortunately, it's more just about being a numbers game. And I think until storytelling becomes, the art of storytelling becomes the main focus again, I feel like change isn't really going to happen. But we did speak about Mass Effect, but do you think Dragon Age has a future? Or do you think Velgard just burnt it to the ground?
I think it will, but I think what they'll do is, as I said before, revamp the series. Do similar what they did to, like the Shepard kind of like collection for Mass Effect. Do something similar for Origins and possibly for 2. And then see what is the flavor for these two games, and then say, okay, then now because we've kind of like got them back on our side because we've given them the games that they liked, but with a fresh new coat of paint and improved some aspects of it, we can now try and get them to then come back with another installment. And I think the major issue, it's also affecting like not just games, but also TV series and movies, is that making stuff is becoming more expensive. And I think one of the things that Microsoft kind of saw early was that you can't constantly make AAA games because you have to bank on loads and loads of people buying the games. It's like the Spider-Man 2 game, I think cost either, I might be wrong on this, $120 million to make, and that's film production money.
Yeah.
And they had to sell at least 11 million copies to make the game a success.
Yeah.
So I think Xbox realized that we can't base our success on the actual people buying the games. That's why we're going to release a kind of like subscription service. So if we produce good enough games, they will continue to keep the subscription service going. And that can help to then fund the games. If people want to buy them outright, they can. If we want to put our games like Halo or Gears of War, that if you told an Xbox fan 10 years ago, oh, Gears of War and Halo might be on PlayStation, they'd be like, over my dead body. But now Microsoft are like, games are too expensive to keep them exclusive. And I think Sony are the last ones to the party, because Nintendo can keep their games exclusive for the rest of the world because they know their fan base will buy anything Nintendo, anything Zelda, anything Mario, and they literally have a console which is very different. But Sony have started to realize that's why you've got like The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 on Steam, God of War and God of War Ragnarok on Steam, and Ghost of Tsushima, and also the follow-up will also be on Steam. And then you also have like Horizon as well. I keep forgetting the full name of the game.
Horizon Zero Dawn.
The Horizon series, that is now on Steam as well. So it's like they've also realized we can't just produce games for our own select console because it's too expensive. So I think they'll be, and they've even started having their own, like, putting games on like PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
But the fact that Xbox can tell their fans that you can play Call of Duty as soon as it comes out, not have to buy the game, and it will be on Game Pass. And it, as with like Activision being a part of the ecosystem of now Xbox, you don't have to think about it then being removed for maybe the next 2 or 3 years. So then you've probably finished and played the hell out of it. There's been two other Call of Duties down the line. But the fact that you haven't had to then spend like potentially for like, I think $16.99 a month, I have an access to 400 games. The cleverness of it is that you will not play 400 games in that space of time. But the thinking in your mind is that I've got access, that I can play a minute of 400 games and I can have access to it.
It feels like good value for money.
Yeah.
Money. Yeah. No, that's true. I think it's really smart, like, for companies to sort of incorporate that sort of, this is our individual selling point that other companies don't follow through on. I think that sort of draws a lot of people in. And yeah, I think with the gaming industry, with the movie and TV show industry, there is this sort of, like you said, it is very expensive to make these things. So it really just becomes a lot harder to, sort of bank on, if the story isn't good, people aren't going to buy it. So maybe we should just make the combat really good, because if the combat's good, and then I think it goes back to what you said there. I think with the sort of collab and even sort of revamping older games, I feel like, for example, if they kept the dialogue wheel of Origins, but for example gave it Veilguard combat, that could probably take it to the clouds, in my opinion.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think with the future of gaming, because even when I remember when I played Mass Effect Andromeda, and I remember because I remember the main complaints being about how like laggy the faces were and the tired expressions and stuff like that. But it goes back to the point of you really see the transition of how the games really focus on just trying to get like quick money out of people, and I think this goes for anything, but a lot of people use nostalgia and use like name bases of things to sort of draw people in, whether they're following the source material or not. They're just like, no, but this is the name of the thing that you like, so come get it, come buy. I think a lot of people bank on that, and then they get confused that people are disappointed because it doesn't follow the source material. It doesn't give fans what they've been requesting or what they want, and I think that is what, for example, Andromeda and Veilguard represent in that sense. But also, and I think the final nail on the coffin to it all is also storytelling elements mainly only thrive in fast person like games, like open world. It doesn't have to be open world, but like those type of games. But there's been, because of, I guess, I don't know, the success of things like Call of Duty and Fortnite and FIFA and things like that, there is a lot more of a push for multiplayer things. And I think it's really hard to have a storytelling element when the game is multiplayer. And I think, like, certain games, like, I don't know, like, when I think of multiplayer storytelling games, I think of what, like, Neverwinter. But that's historical. But I think in that sense that it's and like initially Dragon Age was supposed to be Dragon Age Veilguard was meant to be multiplayer, and they even tried to incorporate multiplayer features into Inquisition, for example. But I think it comes at a cost, because that's what happened with Anthem, and that's what's happened with Veilguard. Like, these attempts of trying to make these live service games and these big multiplayer games just sort of fall on its head, because it goes against the natural essence of what the games naturally represented and were about before. People didn't want, like, fair enough, it can be fun to play with your friends, but I don't really sit and think I'd love to play Dragon Age with my friends. It's like Dragon Age is my story. I can do what I want. I don't really need other people.
Yeah.
The companions like me, like that's great. That's all I need. But you don't really need that essence of somebody else being there. And I think certain games that have more of a linear approach to these things, like for example, like Dark Souls. Dark Souls is just like it's you in this world, and you know, just run up and down and case closed. Even Horizon, that's why I like Horizon as well. Horizon has that sort of open world aspect where it's you engage and interact with the world, but it's just you just living as this character and role playing as this character. And I think it gets the job done because it's able to effectively tell a story and it doesn't get sort of mushed in with also trying to achieve multiple goals at once. And I think, to be honest, this is actually going to be funny because I'm going to compare this with X-Men right now. But even when I think of Dragon Age 2, for example, in the aspects of storytelling, it's interesting that they were able to not only sum up the Mage and Templar conflict, but then also have the whole Kunari thing, and then also just the general like lifestyle of Kirk will all underpin the show. But they were able to present the story very well compared to, for example, like X-Men 3, which tried to do those things similarly with their concepts, and then it just kind of became a big mess. But Dragon Age 2, regardless of what people say, no one in essence technically critiques the story itself. People mainly will talk about, you know, the same reanimation being used in the combat being whatever. But usually the story is actually quite respected for Dragon Age 2 and the way it pushes the narrative forward. So I think going back to that sort of drawing board of just focusing on what you're made to do, you're like, I feel like people don't play Call of Duty for the story. They don't really hear people raving about how amazing the Call of Duty stories are. So I think, going back to what you specialize in is the most important thing.
Yeah, and that's like a powerful note to end on, especially because the fact that people are now playing Oblivion because of the story. People are going back to Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. People are going back to still playing Skyrim because, it's open world, but the story and also the world building in that game. And I think the key thing when it comes to RPGs is that it's the story. If you can relay the story and it be so compelling, people can forgive the issues with companions. They can forgive
even combat to some degree.
They can forgive a lot of things as long as the core story is there. Because like a remake of like similar to like the Final Fantasy remake that was on Sony, if they did that to Dragon Age 2, fans would be ecstatic and love it because the story is there. Like, there'll be no point in time someone will say, let's remake the Veilguard, or let's remake an Andromeda. Why? Because the story isn't there. And I think people forget, like, when it comes to RPGs, it's literally storytelling. It goes back to the days of, like, tabletop storytelling, and that's why people play them, not for the gameplay, less for the graphics. Companions, yes, because that's a part of the storytelling, but having a really good story is what convinces people to play games and can make people go back and play old games and even play games which were the actual like combat and even though the aesthetics aren't as
like Origins
up to date. Like people still go on YouTube and they say, "Oh, this is my character playing Origins" to this day because the story is there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, when the story is that compelling, it helps. And it doesn't even necessarily just have to be old releases. I think even the Monkey King Wukong game got a lot of love, just for not even just the action, but even the storytelling of itself. So I think there are companies that are picking up on this and are able to create games that are able to fulfill that void that BioWare used to dominate in. And I think it's sad because if they don't really get their act together, which they're really struggling to do, someone else will just come for the cake and take it. So I think that's what that would be the most important thing that they need to do, because that is what draws the fans, and that's what, in essence, carries a legacy.
Yeah. And 100%, I think that's a perfect thing to finish on. Thank you, Leeshaun, for being on this episode.
Thank you.
And I'm just happy to find like another BioWare major fan of Dragon Age and also. Well, you're a major fan to the memory of BioWare because what we can say is that this BioWare isn't the BioWare that we remember.
That is very, very true. Very, very true. This is almost like a memorial for BioWare.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe that should be the name of the episode. Memorial for BioWare? Question mark?
Yeah, that should be a really, really good title. And before we sign off, where can people follow you at?
So I am on Instagram. My name is Leeshaun._X. Yeah, that's my main thing. I mainly just on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok as well, but I haven't used TikTok in a while. TikTok is where I used to do a lot of my anime content. I currently can't remember. Sorry. I think my TikTok name is Lee Xavier, I believe. See, I haven't been able to use TikTok because in Hong Kong it's banned, so I've got my account for a long time ago.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll put it under the bottom of the video. We'll have your Instagram and also TikTok as well. Which also is something that probably fans have just realised that wait, isn't TikTok Chinese app? Why is it banned in Hong Kong?
But to be honest, they have their own version of TikTok called Xiao Hong Xu. So that's really been popular, especially when America banned TikTok for 10 minutes. That really popped off. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I will. I think when I go back to London, I'll probably try to post more of my anime content when I get back. But there's pretty long roster of things for people to enjoy if they do want to check out my channel. But thank you for having me, and it's been absolutely fun.
You're welcome.
So yeah.
So, and thank you all. Thank you for watching and going through the memory lane concerning BioWare, the glory years, and then now the mournful years, and like. That you have the Morn Watch in Valgard, and now it feels like me and Leeshaun are part of the Morn Watch for BioWare. That it's dead corp that we're dragging. It's wonderful for all of you to be here, and also if you want to check us out, so we are part of the Pick Up the Mic network. We'll have links under the description, which will have the links to the Patreon, and we are part of the broader Pick Up the Mic network. So we also do sci-fi and fantasy